Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, I'm just so thrilled to have the conversation that I get to have today with our special guest. Because let's face it, for some of us out there, raise your hand if this is you, you've got a to-do list that is a mile long. You are running in 80 bazillion different directions, it seems sometimes. And oh yeah, the holidays are sneaking around the corner. There is more and more and more being piled on into your thinking brain than ever before. And now's the time to step off that proverbial hamster wheel and just imagine a different way. And what we're going to simplify today is how to relax your mind, truly understanding the concept of letting go in maybe a brand new way that you've never heard before. So my special guest today is Peter Russell, and he is a leading thinker on consciousness and contemporary spirituality. His most recent book is Letting Go of Nothing, Relax Your Mind, and Discover the Wonder of Your True Nature. He studied theoretical physics, experimental psychology, and computer science at the University of Cambridge, and also meditation and Eastern philosophy in India. He's pioneered the introduction of personal growth programs to corporations worldwide in the 1980s. His mission is to distill the essential wisdom on human consciousness found in the world's various spiritual traditions and to help simplify and disseminate their teachings on self-liberation in contemporary and compelling ways. So, I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Peter Russell. Hi, Peter.
Thank you, and lovely to be here. Looking forward to this.
Oh, as I am as well. And really, truly reading your book, it was a wonderful nighttime read for me. Bite-sized chapters, but very profound concepts that I would find myself in a pattern of reading a couple of chapters a night, letting it sink into my subconscious through my dreamscape that night, and then the next morning really chewing on some of these concepts in a big, profound way over coffee. Mm-hmm. So because we're talking about big stuff today, Peter, I was thinking it might be of value for you, me, and our listeners to just take a moment and center in. Would you lead us through some sort of breathing or grounding exercise that gets us to that place?
Yes, I'd love to. Yes, it's actually a good way to start things, to actually come back to a more relaxed, grounded state. So what I'd like to suggest is, if you feel okay with it, close your eyes. If you don't, it's okay to do it with eyes open. It doesn't matter. The first thing is just to take a few deeper breaths, particularly on the breathing out, just like, because that just encourages us to relax a bit. And it actually is a sign to the body in a way that everything's okay, we can relax. So I always start with that, just a few deeper breaths, breathing out. And then just noticing what's there, just noticing what's there in the present moment, not focusing on anything. We're not focusing on the breath or anything, but you may notice sounds around you. You may notice feelings in the body. You may notice little thoughts coming in. We're just noticing what is, not trying to check anything. But the key idea here is just as we let the body relax, we're beginning to let the mind relax as well. Normally, we focus on something. The mind is focused on what we've got to do, what we're doing, or some other thought or something. That's the way we use our mind most of the time, is in a focused way. So I just like to suggest for now, you do the opposite and I think of it as zooming out. Instead of zooming in on something, just let our attention expand. We zoom out to get the bigger picture of just being here, just how it is to just be sitting here, noticing the environment that's there. And as I say, just letting the attention itself relax, not trying to focus on anything. If you notice that's happening, just notice it and just go, yes, just let my attention relax. Just let it soften. And then just begin to notice how that feels. Just notice, there's often a sense of ease, relief, relaxation. Some people call it a sense of lightness or spaciousness. It's different things for different people, but just noticing how that feels when you begin to let the body relax, and then begin to let the mind relax, just letting the attention relax and zoom out a bit. And what you're going to notice from time to time is thoughts coming in. This is something that people often say, oh, I can't meditate, I'm always thinking. Thoughts are going to come in. It's natural. Ask the most experienced meditator, they'll say thoughts come in. But the thing is here, we don't try to stop thoughts, we don't try to beat them or see them as the enemy or anything like that. But we just take a different attitude to them. So when you notice the thoughts come in and you're drifting off on somewhere, following some idea, just in this moment, just choose not to follow that thought anymore. You can follow it later, but right now we've decided to sit down quietly for a few minutes. There's no need to be doing anything or worrying about anything. So when you notice a thought coming in, just make that choice. I'm not going to follow you anymore. Just let it go. And when you do, what you'll notice is the present begins to reveal itself again. It's like, oh yes, here I am. Here I am sitting on the chair and, oh, there's that bird song outside again, whatever it is, or just the sound of the air conditioning or something. And this really is the basic practice that I encourage people to do, is just not following the thought and just don't even try to come back to the present. The present is there. The thoughts are always taking us out of the present. So we just let the mind relax, come back to just noticing what is there in the present, not focusing on anything, just this expanded awareness of the present moment. We're not trying to get anywhere, have anything happen, anything like that. We don't need to do anything. It's almost for once we're not doing anything. We're just letting go of doing and just coming back to just simply being and just noticing your experience as it is. And then one thing I encourage people to do is, if this is feeling a little easier for you, a little more relaxed, whatever it is, a little lighter, just notice that feeling, because that's part of what's happening in the present moment. You're feeling a little different, hopefully a little better. And just include that in your awareness. It's easy to miss it. So just include that, just if you're noticing something of this nature, just savor it. I would say, sometimes I'd like to say to people, just soak in it. Just notice how this feels and enjoy it. And then whenever you find yourself wandered off again, just come back, just notice, coming back, noticing, there's the present moment, and then noticing how that feels, and just coming back to just savoring it for a few moments. And let's just leave it there for now. It's a very basic practice. But also when we finish the practice, I suggest you don't rush out. I always suggest people first of all, just maybe flex your fingers or something, have a little movement. And then just open your eyes very gently, just maybe a little bit, if you've had your eyes closed, just allow a little bit of light to come in. So we don't sort of rush back into the world. If we just come back gently and slowly, then we bring some of that quality we've been tasting in the meditation. We begin to bring that with us into the world. So just in your own time, when you feel ready, just gently open your eyes and come back to being here together. And then we'll continue from there.
Thank you for that. I feel much more grounded now after that. And isn't it such a lovely and gentle reminder that it doesn't have to be extravagant? Even simply 5 or 7 minutes of pausing, focusing on your breath, staying present really does change a lot.
Yes, yes, yeah. And I encourage people to do this several times a day. We think of meditation, I've got to do my 20 minutes in the morning or 20
Right.
minutes in the evening. It becomes a discipline, and then we feel guilty because I didn't do it.
Right.
This is something we can just do whenever it occurs to us. We can just let me just pause a minute, just
Yeah.
pause and just be quiet, take a few deeper breaths, relax the attention.
Yeah.
So it's very simple, and there's no effort in it. We're not trying to get anywhere. So, I mean, there's many, many other practices of meditation. Some involve concentration, focusing the mind, repetitions of mantras and things. They all have their value. They all, they have a certain goal in mind and they have value. But this is just a very simple way of just coming back to being here now and relaxing.
Yes. And I think that when you are in a space of, really intentional breath work, and intentionally focusing on the present without trying to fix anything or trying to get to a destination or trying to tick something off your to-do list or otherwise, it can be very liberating. So
Yes.
the topic we're talking about is simplifying, like how to relax your mind. So maybe flipping to the polar opposite is where we need to begin. And that's a place where I think of very tenderly and for my own self sometimes, being a type A control freak, wanting to control all things, all situations, all moments, and used to be in the past trying to control people as well.
Yes.
That,
Yes.
a spoiler alert, is not a very good way to live. I found that out.
Right.
Don't make the mistakes that I have in the past. And so for those that are the card-carrying type A control freaks that are listening in, we all know it's very hard to let go. People say, "Oh,
Yes.
well, just surrender, just let go." And then you go, "Well, yeah, if I could do that, I would have done that ages ago."
Right.
Let's start there. Like, what's a better way instead of this concept of letting go?
Right. Yes. Well, we have these, we have people like this. I know I've been there myself. Endless to-do lists, which you
Yes.
never ever finish.
No.
And somewhere down the bottom of the to-do list is meditate.
Right.
So because we never finish the to-do list, we're always doing something, and that creates tension. It creates tension in the body. It creates tension in the mind,
Yeah.
and so we end up in this sort of energized, tense state, which I think we all know is not good for us.
Yeah.
We know that tension is behind so much of where our bodies start malfunctioning in some way or another.
Yeah.
So just to see, it's valuable. There are things we have to do. Not to say we shouldn't be, have to-do lists and all that, but we get attached to them. And the attachment very much is, the essence of attachment is, if I don't do this, things aren't going to work out. I won't be happy. I won't survive. Bad things are going to happen to me. So we have that belief system that's going on in the back of our mind that I have to do this. And so one thing I often ask people when they're sort of caught in this is to ask two questions. And when they really feel I've got to do this, and yet in the back of their mind they're sort of beginning to question it,
Yeah.
just to say, if I got this, whatever it is you want to get or do, would I really be happy?
Yeah.
And the answer is maybe for a moment, but probably not for a long time. And then the reverse question is, if I didn't do this, if I didn't get this, could I still be happy? And the answer nearly always is, well, yes, I suppose I could. And so it's a way of stepping out of when we get into these. It's almost like an addiction we get into.
Yeah.
Got to do this. And like any addiction, chemical addiction, we're addicted to it because we think it's going to make us feel good in some way or another. And then the effect wears off and we go for another fix, whatever it is.
Right.
And I think it's the same in our world. We have all these things, I've got to get this, got to do this, etc., etc. And they do provide some temporary satisfaction, but the effect wears off and we go in search of another fix. Oh, I've got to get this, got to do this. And it's that same sort of thing. So we're sort of addicted to doing and getting things done.
Yeah. And as I was reading your book and I was thinking about this exact concept and thinking about my own life, both personally and professionally, I can only speak for myself, but I wonder if we unpack that a bit. I mean, even as you said earlier, gosh, I should be meditating 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, I'm not getting it done. Ugh. Then there becomes the shame story that is a belief in your identity, the deeper rooted thing of who you think you are or are not. I think that part of productivity and this like real craze and addiction to overworking and getting things done in that realm is because we have this shame story underneath that if we are not productive, we are not worthy. Is that something that you think is at play here?
Oh, I think it's very prevalent. I mean, I find it funny. Ask somebody how they're doing, and they say, "Oh, I'm busy.
I'm very busy. Yes.
I'm so busy."
Yes.
It's like that's the initial reaction. It's not, "Oh, I'm so relaxed. I've got time on my hands. I'm really enjoying it." No,
Right.
"Oh, I'm busy. I'm busy." You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Well, which makes that glorification of busy as a badge of honor, and especially with entrepreneurs. I mean, my goodness.
Yes. It means we're being successful because we've got lots to do. Yes. Somebody who's just got a regular, boring job in some organization isn't going to say proudly, "Oh, I'm so busy."
Yeah.
They're going to say, "Oh, God, it's a bit of a chore, whatever."
Yeah.
But I mean, for those who are, I think I know this working for myself. I found myself saying this to people, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm busy."
Yes.
It's a badge of honor in a way. Yes.
And it's a trap.
It's a trap.
You talk about a variation of letting go. When you are truly able to let go, you have liberation and freedom. But the letting go is through letting in and letting be. What do you mean by that?
Yes, it's a way I reinterpret letting go. Normally, when people talk about letting go, they think it's something they have to do. I have to do the letting go. Yeah. And people say, "Well, I try to let go, but I just can't do it." People say, "Oh, just let go." And we say, "I can't. I've tried. I can't." And in a way, I think letting go is not something we do. It's almost the opposite. It's a relaxation of the holding on.
Right.
And I sometimes use the example, if you're holding on to a small rock, you've gone to let go. The first thing you do is you notice the grip. You notice how you're gripping it, how it feels to grip. And then when you notice that, the muscles can begin to relax and the letting go happens. And so I take the same approach with letting go. Here, the grip is the mind has on something. This is really important, or it could be an emotion. I'm really upset about what happened or something. The mind is holding on. It's gripping something. So the first thing I suggest to people is to let in the feeling of gripping, like letting in, pausing, and noticing how it feels. Whenever we're holding on, there's nearly always some form of tension, tightness, or resistance, something like that. So the first thing to do is just like pause and notice, how does it feel? Whatever it is you're holding on to, just notice there's some sort of uncomfortable feeling there that comes from the holding on. Notice that. And so that's the letting be, or that's the letting in. Letting in how you're feeling.
And you did that in the exercise at the beginning, not only being present, but then seeing and experiencing how you're feeling in this present moment as well.
Exactly. And that's something we often don't do. And we talk about feeling, but it's interesting because we use the word feeling both for an emotion, I feel sad, but also the word feeling for the body. I feel tickling or pricking or pain or something. It's the same word. And it's no accident because every emotion has some counterpart in the body. I mean, an emotion, psychologists talk about it as an action tendency. Whenever you're feeling some emotion, there's an impulse to act in some way or other, whether it's to go and hit somebody, to grab something, or run away, or even something you mentioned, shame. I mean, shame, if you look at the body, what's happening in shame, there's usually this sort of hollowness and a feeling of want to sort of disappear somewhere, which again is an action tendency. So with feeling, we can begin to let in what the body's telling you, how it's feeling, and be curious. It's not just saying, oh, I know what fear is, it feels like this. It's like, no, take a moment to actually investigate it. Be interested. What does it really feel like? What's actually going on? And I sometimes ask, is there something else going on in my body I haven't noticed? And usually when you do that, something else appears. And so you just get to know what's happening in the body, but then not trying to change it. That's why the second part is letting it be, allow it to be there, not resisting it or trying to change it. And as you do that, often you'll find it just begins to soften a little, just become a little less strong. And then the other side of an emotion is there's always some story, some narrative, something you are telling yourself about what's going on. So if you're upset at somebody, it's probably because they did something that you think is wrong. They got in the way of what you wanted to do. They're not behaving as you think they should have done, whatever it is. There's a story going on. And to let that in, because that's often instructive. You let in the story of why you think they were so awful. And as you let that in, what often happens, you begin to see, well, actually, what were they thinking? What was going on for them? Did they have a bad night last night? Is it something that's going on in their relationship? Is it something coming up from their childhood? Who knows? But you begin to see that, in a way, we think they shouldn't have behaved like that. If you took all their circumstances into account, that's just how they did behave. So we can begin to put ourselves in other shoes. And so our personal story begins to lose some of its power. Yes, there may well be truth to it insofar as, yes, they did say something that was unpleasant or awkward or critical. There's truth in it. But then to let that soften. And it's the same thing with letting go of the rock. When you begin to just let the feeling soften a bit, let the story soften a bit, then the letting go begins to happen on its own. You don't have to do anything to let go. It's more you have to create the right sort of mental environment that allows the letting go to happen.
Right. And what I hear in what you just said there, especially with letting be, is it requires a certain level of, I dare say, emotional intelligence, ability to empathize and have compassion for other people's points of view and beliefs as well, right?
Yes, it does. Yes. This ability to put yourself in another person's shoes.
Right. But then the letting in is about really, truly giving space and acknowledging what you're feeling in your body, in your emotions, in your being, your thinking brain, your heart, your soul, your intuition, all of that, right?
Yes, that's the first bit, just letting it in. And that's something we don't do much.
Right.
Because we're so often we're resisting it. I mean, if you have an uncomfortable emotion, what we tend to do is we push it to the back of our mind.
Sure.
I don't want to feel the sadness, I'm going to start blobbing out in public. Or if I really felt this anger, I go and punch somebody. So,
right.
And it's so, there's a good social value in that.
Sure.
There's a good social value, and we're conditioned to do it. So we hold things in, or we push them out to the edge of our consciousness where they're not going to bother us. Right. So we think, but they still control us out there. So letting in is counter to so much of what we've been conditioned, what we've been taught. It's in a way, it's revolutionary at first, but I find as soon as I do that, I start feeling easier. I start feeling better. You think, if I let in, I had this once with sadness. And I was sitting and I thought, if I let in this sadness, it's just going to overwhelm me.
Yeah.
And it's going to be awful. And in fact, it was the opposite. When I actually let it in, I could feel it in my body, and I could feel this feeling down in my belly, and I could feel what it was. And it wasn't overwhelming. It was almost the opposite. I could be with it. It was the resistance to it that was actually upsetting me.
Right. And I feel like sadness, rage, anger, whatever those emotions are, there's no good or bad. I mean, they are part of your whole spirit, your whole experience of being a human being, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of some dear friends of mine down in London, Adam Wilder and the crew that at Togetherness, they run regular events called the Rage Club. So creating space to acknowledge, experience rage in a safe space. Obviously, you're not hurting yourself and you're not hurting others, but you're bringing it to light. You're giving yourself that permission to feel through it, which allows you then to process it, right? And dissipate whatever is underneath it as well, right?
Yes, I think any pain, any discomfort is actually a call for attention.
Yeah.
Whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, whatever it is, it's actually your being saying, hey, there's something going on here. Attention, please, attention. And what we do is the opposite. No, I'm not going to give you attention because I fear all the things are going to happen if I give you attention.
Right.
So it's the opposite, giving it attention, which is letting it in. And I mean, one thing I find useful somewhere between the Rage Club and what we're talking about here is writing it down.
Yeah.
I just find, when I notice I've got something going on, I'm feeling some tense or some irritation about something somebody did yesterday, I'll write it down. I just write, and it's almost just completely free writing. I don't think about it. I let it come out, 4-letter words and all. What a stupid blah 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 blah. If it is, just allow the 4-letter words out. Everything, just write out. Give it expression, and in that way, I'm just giving expression to myself. We don't need to go to a Rage Club necessarily to do this. We can do it. I often do it in the morning when I get up. I notice what's there. I write it out. And it's just for me. Afterwards, I can tear it up, burn it.
Yeah.
It's not for anybody else to see, or even for me to see later. It's just that act of writing stuff out begins to give it expression, and it begins to release it.
Yeah, because the alternative is you bundle it down, you push it down, or you numb it away. And when you push it down in your physical body, that's where chronic pain starts welling up, or digestive issues, or back pain, or things like that. Right? It's gonna find its way and try to express itself in physical ways if it can't be expressed emotionally. Right?
Exactly. Yes. In fact, there was a New York doctor I read. He was writing about 20, 30 years ago about back pain, Dr. Sarno. And his research, he found that 50% of all back pain was repressed anger and rage.
Oh.
And he actually had a really interesting mental model of how that happened, how the muscles responded, how it restricted the blood flow. It was a fascinating model. And that's why I got the idea of writing it down. He said what he would do with his patients is get them to write every morning, spend 10, 15 minutes just writing whatever they wanted to about their anger and rage. And within a month, 50% of them is gone.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, we've all heard it before. The idea that it's not about what happens to you in life, but how you perceive what has happened to you and will happen to you in life. And we know that on sort of an intellectual level, I think, many times. However, we continue to go back to old habits of glorifying busy, or adding more onto our plates, to-dos or emotions or what have you. We get bogged down in this overrun, stressed out, near burnout kind of way of living. So how do we return to a natural mind, as you say, one that's more relaxed, but equally, because unfortunately we can't all be monks on the top of a mountain, we still have to get things done. So how do we do both of those things, Peter?
A balance.
Yes.
A balance in time. So, that little meditation we started with, that's something we can just do for a few minutes, brings us back to ourselves. And we start touching what's real, what's really going on. So we come back to ourselves. And then we go back out into activity and we lose it. We get wrapped up in it again. But the more times we can do that, and the more times that I find we can just savor the enjoyment of how that feels to do it, that becomes a reminder. It becomes like a motivation. I can be in the middle of something and it's like, yes, let me go back there, let me have that balance. And gradually it builds up. And what I do actually is I leave notes around the house, just saying pause, just P-A-U-S-E in big letters. And right now there's one on my staircase and there's one on my back door. So when I come up the stairs, I know, and I just stop. I just stop and say, okay. Let me just pause my thinking. What's going on? How am I feeling?
Yeah.
And often little things bubble up that were there just underneath just underneath consciousness, because they were obscured by all the thinking to do the busyness. They were obscured, and just pausing is just like, I come back to balance, and things fall into perspective better.
Yes. It's back to that thing you were talking about earlier of zooming out. One of the things that I stumbled upon that's similar to this over the last couple of years is I would catch myself when I feel that anxiety kind of bubbling up, or even a full-blown panic attack of sorts. One of the things that I have learned over the last couple of years is that when you are in that moment about to fall down that rabbit hole of a panic attack or otherwise, it is quite profound to remember that in that moment, the world has not changed. Not one bit. The only thing that has actually changed is your heart rate has elevated and you actually having that panic attack in that moment.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting. And again, it's not a place of shame or like, how dare you, fall apart like that or anything like that. It's just a moment of going, hang on. I'm having this moment, I'm having a physical reaction to my perception of what's happening around me, and questioning, hey, is this real? Like, is it really a place where I'm getting chased by a Bengal tiger? Or is it something that is happening in my body as a reaction that may not be true?
Right. And I think this is really important. I mean, it's two things. It's how we see things, our interpretation of events is really what drives us. And so one of the questions I ask people often is just pause and say, could there be another way of looking at this?
Yeah.
But important, not to try and find it, because then the thinking mind comes in and tries to work something out. But just asking what I call our more authentic self, just pausing and just posing the question. I like to pose it in a completely open, innocent way. Just, could there perhaps, just possibly, I don't know, be another way of seeing this? And wait. And sometimes it comes up instantly. Of course, this is what's going on, or this is what's happening. Other times nothing happens, and then a bit later in the day, it's like, I can see where I was stuck in the way I was seeing it.
And yes, that question alone, when I read that in your book, it really challenged me, Peter, because, I think that we as humans have also been conditioned to quickly judge, right? Quickly put things into boxes, safe, unsafe, friendly, not friendly, this or that, in order to make sense of the world around us and also the world inside us, right? Our identity. And so when you had shared a story about being in an argument with your partner and then having that intuitive thought of like, could there be another way to look at this? It's pushing those boxes, it's pushing those boundaries and also building your empathy and compassion, right?
Yes. What happened there, it was just one of those little tiffs that come up, and we've been sort of, getting at each other for a couple of days. She wasn't doing what I wanted her to do. I wasn't doing what she wanted me to do. Yes. And we were sort of like, there's a little, that sort of angst, that feeling. I just sat down and just explored and said, is there another way of seeing this? And what happened then, what was so amazing, it was instant. It wasn't like 5 minutes later. It was instant. My inner knowing just came blaring forth, and it just said, basically what I saw was, here's another human being with her stuff, having to deal with me and my stuff, navigating her way through the world, and just like, of course, that's what it is. And instantly love returned. There was compassion, there was love, and I realized we'd been out of love for a couple of days. The love returned, And then I felt at ease. It's like, I was just screwing myself up about what was happening and how she was wrong. I was screwing myself up over the way I saw it, just the way I was seeing it. And that shifted. And then, and I often find this, there was a sense of obviousness about it. Well, of course that's what's happening. Why hadn't I seen that before? And the reason I hadn't seen it before was I was so caught up in my position, what was right, how I was seeing things. I was so caught up in that the obvious truth was just hidden from me.
Well, and that's what I felt was a new way that I hadn't really heard while reading your book. Is thinking about how story really shapes our identity. Story shapes our perception of the world around us, which to a certain extent, I suppose, can be a good thing. It keeps us from being in prison and making poor choices. It keeps us functioning in a first world country and society and culture. However, what I thought was interesting in the book, you talk about there's sort of two timelines going. There's the present timeline, and then there's the imagination timeline in our heads that is imagining what other people are thinking and how they're going to respond when I say this thing, and what the outcome will be like, what it will look like. We run scenarios in our head before they've even actually happened.
Right, and may never happen.
My goodness, it's exhausting.
Yes, we're always creating, not necessarily problems, but challenges. How am I going to deal with this? Or planning something. We get wrapped up in planning. What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Or whatever it is. Some of it's useful. There's times, just to emphasize, there's really times when we need to plan and do things.
Right, for risk management.
And worry about things.
Yes.
Thinking is really important. But just to catch those times when we're almost on automatic, just planning things, which, so often, they just never happen. And yet we get so caught up in it. So those are things to catch. When you notice that happening, that's a time just to say, thank you. I'm not going to go there anymore. I don't need to go there anymore. Just to pause. And again, just in that moment, just pausing it, you're noticing a softening of the tension that has gone into the worry. Just like, yes, forget that for now. Just come back.
And when you nudge yourself back to the present, you intuitively will ask yourself, like, what is real? What is in front of me? What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? And to question some of those stories that are swirling in our head of future conversations that haven't even happened, and future outcomes that may never happen.
Or even conversations in the past that should have happened.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm very good at that. Re-rehearsing and perfecting, those scenarios that we blundered in the past. Oh, yes. Blue ribbon over here. Which makes me kind of think about one of your chapters. And if you don't mind, I'd love to read from it. It comes from your chapter, Falling from Grace.
Yes.
It says, you say here, we did not fall from grace at some past point in time. We fall from grace every day, repeatedly falling from the grace of the present moment into the world of time. The common assumption that happiness comes from what we have or do leads to a near incessant mental chatter telling us what is going on, what we should think, and how we should respond. We might look back to the past. What went wrong? What could I have done better? Or we might reminisce about the good times we've had, wondering how we might recapture that happiness. And we worry about the future. Will it be the way we think it should be for us to be happy? What do we need? How can we get it? So I think a lot of times, and maybe just conditioning as a child, certainly as a child that grew up in the States and as an adult who lived overseas in England for a season, we believe that getting stuff and achieving stuff is how we will become happy, is how we will become relaxed. And I think as I get older, I realize that maybe that's not true.
Right.
My goodness.
It's not completely true. I mean, there's some elements of truth to it, but we get so conditioned into it. But sorry, you were going to say something else.
Yeah. Well, I just want to ask you a little bit deeper about falling from grace. How do we keep ourselves from falling into that second timeline of imagination and mental chatter, and actually get back to center on a more regular basis?
Yeah. Well, obviously what we talk about is catching it when it happens, but often, that's hard because we're so caught in it, we don't realize it's happening. One thing that I like to do is just as many times, again, whenever I can remember, is just to ask myself, am I feeling any tension?
Yeah.
Am I feeling any tension, whether it's in my body or sort of deep down in my being or in my mind? Am I feeling any tension? And just to notice that. And that nearly always opens my mind to what is actually going on that is causing the tension.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes it can just be the tension of just that busyness of one thing to another, to another, to another. But oftentimes it's like I'm tense because there's something I've been thinking has caused that tension. So just asking myself that from time to time, whenever I remember, am I noticing any tension? Gives me a clue as to what's causing it. But also, as always, when we notice it, it begins to soften. It's this thing. If you don't notice something, it persists. It stays in place. If you can notice it, you're giving it the opportunity to begin to soften and dissolve.
Right. What becomes a whisper at first becomes really shouting at you very loudly in your body or otherwise. That's why you hear of people devastatingly having heart attacks in their 30s and 40s, succumbing to very serious illnesses because they've shoved it down or not listened to the whisper, and then now it's taken over.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about the parable of the rope from your book, and how that story specifically applies to our mind.
Right. Well, the parable of the rope, just to say it very simply, is the story of somebody holding on to a rope, and they're holding on for dear life because they feel if they let go, it's going to be the end. And they look around and they see everybody else is holding on tightly. And then along comes this wise woman who says, actually, if you just raised one finger, just lifted one finger, you'd actually feel a lot better. You'd feel more at peace. You'd feel easier. And so the guy thinks, well, I could do that. So he takes his first initiation and lifts one finger and he's okay. He hasn't fallen. And so she says, but, there's even more. She said, if you would dare to lift a second finger, you could actually feel even better, even more at peace. Yeah. And he thinks, and then, he does it. He lifts his second finger, now just holding on by two fingers. And then it goes on, and she says, what about the third finger? I know you're feeling scared. I know it doesn't make sense, but, I promise you, if you just lift that third finger, you will feel even more joy and peace and happiness. He thinks this is ridiculous, but he knows he's got to do it, and so he musters up the courage and flexes his finger, and now he's just holding on by one little finger onto the rope, and he's thinking, I should have fallen long ago. And he begins to think, is there something wrong with holding on to the rope? Is there something wrong with it? And she says to him, I've gone as far as I can go with you. I can't go any further. This final step, you have to do yourself. Yeah. But she says, trust me, just trust me. And so he hangs on by one, and eventually he lets his little finger relax and let go of the rope, and nothing happens. And he realized nothing happens because he was standing on the ground. Yeah. And so the metaphor in this, the ground we're standing on is the ground of our own being, our own authentic self. That's always there. That's the ground of our being. And we're holding on because we think if we don't hold on, bad things are going to happen to us, or whatever it is, I won't get what I want. So we're holding on. And just the more you begin to release and relax that holding on, the better you feel. And then when you finally let go completely, it's just like, here I am. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. But now I'm standing in my own being. And I hadn't realized that before, because I was thinking, it's the world out there of my ego, my personality, I've got to keep going. And when you finally let go, it's realizing, I've come home. I am here.
Yeah.
It's a coming home.
I love that story so much. And, what a gentle reminder to all of us. Like what I heard and what you said there in your interpretation of it, a lot of times as business owners, we do look around to others like us and we go, oh, she's doing this, or, oh, he seems to be doing this. And if I'm not working this many hours per week or handling this many clients or traveling this much or whatever, then it's an if-then statement. Again, in that alternate imagination reality, that's not necessarily true. That to question our productivity, question our identity, and then come back to what you have proposed in this book of like truly releasing our thoughts, our feelings, our interpretations, beliefs, and expectations, then, could we look at it a different way? I mean, could you have a thriving, bountiful business that pays you what you deserve and desire and want and work 3 days a week? Could you potentially create a lifestyle that looks nothing like anybody else's, that actually is one where you are more present and joy-filled and whole? I mean, it really flips everything on its lid, Peter, when you open the chasm wide, because you go, oh, well, then the rule book has changed because the rule book doesn't exist.
Right. I think so. In fact, I know people who have done that. And, one of them's done it by just actually outsourcing a lot of work. Just through the internet today, we can outsource a lot of things which we think we got to do ourselves or have somebody in our employment to do. But you can outsource it, for, okay, $100 to do this or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think it's possible. And they're the wise people. I remember once years ago when I was doing corporate work, I was talking, this was to the senior board, it was actually, I can mention the company, it doesn't matter, the senior board of Shell in England.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this thing of busyness and time, etc. And I was sort of imagining him as a director of the company being so busy. And so I was talking about, he said, no. He said, anybody who hasn't got time to do other things is not a successful manager. And I was thinking this is going to be the ultimate A-type, holding a whole, helping hold a whole big international corporation together. Yeah. And his attitude was no. We always have time to do other things, to make time. So that just struck me as it was a surprise from my mindset at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
so I think,
and I think that this is where it gets really tricky, and in these concepts, we understand them on a surface level, but to really integrate them on a deep, deep level that creates positive change in your life, I find it's really hard to release those thoughts, feelings, interpretations, beliefs, and expectations. Like, how do we release those, but then equally hold on to that creates our sense of identity and safety in life? Like, how do we do that on a practical level?
We got to have again, it comes back to balance. Yeah. One of the things that I've learned in my life over the years is be yourself. Be yourself. Follow your heart. Follow your own passion. And things are easier. I think what often happens, we can be following other people's expectations or conventions, whatever. Yeah. And that can just take more time and energy. So just one thing that can help in this is just being clear, what's your feeling? What do you want? Be yourself in this, rather than having to conform to some external expectation of how you should be.
I hear that. Yeah. But then do we also need to shed our core desires? Like what? No. I mean, we're not sacrificing those to become a vanilla version of ourselves. We're just shedding the nonsense, getting to a true level of authenticity, right?
We're shedding the stuff that is getting in our way. So, we were talking about emotions earlier. If there's an emotion, some grievance about something that happened in the past, that's getting in the way. So that's something we may need to let go of. Or if there's some, story we're talking about what might possibly happen, but probably won't happen, that's something that's getting in our way. So let go of it. So I'm not talking about letting go of everything,
Right.
but letting go of those things we begin to recognize are actually stopping us being the effective person we can be, but also being a more at ease person as well.
So I guess my last question on this is, you mentioned, in the book that this would help improve relationships, both personally and professionally. Like, how does the practice of relaxing our minds actually do that?
Oh, yes, I think a couple of ways at least. Firstly, we're not going to be so reactive.
Yeah.
The more stable you are in yourself, if somebody, comes and says something that, some sort of criticism or insult or hurts you in some way,
Yeah.
if the ego mind is operating in a reactive mode, it's going to respond with some sort of equal attack or criticism, or you stupid whatever it is, blah, 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 which does not help relationships.
No.
I mean, underneath, I like the principle that underneath, we're all looking for exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
We're all looking to be more content, to be more at ease. None of us want to suffer unnecessarily.
Yeah.
None of us want to be attacked or criticized. So maybe have good feedback, but we don't want that sort of negative criticism. That's what I want. That's what you want. That's what everybody wants. Deep down, we all want the same thing. The ways we go about getting it may be different, but
Sure.
deep down we want the same thing. So recognizing that means that in any interaction, in any communication I have with anybody, I try to frame it in such a way that the other person feels good on hearing it. They don't feel attacked or criticized. Even if I've got something that's, let's call it some sort of critical feedback.
Sure.
There's ways to do that. Instead of just blurting it out, you need to do this better.
Right.
There's simple ways like prefacing it by, I really value our relationship, our working relationship, whatever it is. And I'm concerned about, something that's actually not working properly.
Yeah.
And you could add, and I really feel awkward about saying this. I really feel I'm a bit scared of how you might react. You come across as human, you're stating what is true.
Yeah.
And then when you say, but what I'd really hope you could do better is this, it comes across in a completely different way. So just coming from a more centered, authentic place can reduce that level of attack. Because what happens when two people start attacking each other, you just get into a vicious spiral. And it's a silly game, because the game is, when you analyze it, the game is, you're not loving me properly, you're not treating me right, therefore I'm going to withhold some love from you, I'm going to treat you badly so that you realize the error of your ways,
of course,
and treat me better.
Right.
And when two people are playing that game, it just goes the opposite way.
Right.
So that I found is, I call it the principle of kindness. It's really just thinking, how can I be kind? Whatever I'm saying to this person, how can I be kind? Which is, how can I have the intention that they feel good, they feel loved, they feel appreciated in this interaction.
Right, because I think if you boil it all down, peel that onion back, way back, at the core of human nature is the desire to love and be loved, and to feel connected, to belong, right?
Yes.
And so what you say translates in the professional world as well, especially if you have a conflict with a coworker or a conflict with a client or otherwise. Yes, these are the things that is at the very, very essence and core. But I also want to clarify, because I think this is incredibly important. If you are in, say, an abusive relationship personally, and somebody is doing something to physical harm or otherwise, I mean, it is okay to have an expectation that no, that is not okay, right? We're not releasing our boundaries, for those kinds of toxic relationships to continue to occur. Correct?
Yeah.
Right.
And these are much harder, but I would say I mean, some situations it may just be beyond redemption and you need to get
Sure.
out of that situation.
Right.
But where you feel there's some change could be possible and you want to communicate something, to again, apply the same principle. It's obviously there's something here that's very difficult. I'm not feeling happy. As you
Yeah.
probably know, this isn't working for me. And but again, doing it in a loving way because
Yeah.
they want to be loved,
Right.
and they want to be loved. So if you can do this in a way in which you're demonstrating love, perhaps putting your resentment and hatred on the back burner for a little while,
Mm.
and not let that influence it, but just come through in a way that you're respecting them, you're hoping they feel loved and appreciated in all this, and then as kindly as possible, stating what's going on for you,
Yeah.
what's not working, not straight off how you've got to change, but this isn't working for me. This is what it makes me feel. This is what's happening to me, and then maybe then the conversation can go on to how someone else might modify their behaviour. But I think the
Mm.
first thing is just to express yourself. Again,
Yeah.
express what are you feeling. When you say this to me, I feel a tightening in my chest. I feel
Yes.
this. I feel I want to run away, or I feel I want to hit you. This is what I feel, and to share that, and sharing your feelings needn't be attacking if you
Yeah.
share it right. Like you're just taking responsibility. This is how I feel. It's just that simple, just a simple fact.
Yeah.
Letting the other person know, and that can begin to open up the conversation.
Yes. Starts with you letting in, letting be, and then sparking that conversation to release the tension and dispel the fear and to move on.
Yes.
So, again, if this is intriguing to you and you want to go deeper, I highly recommend Peter's book. It's called Letting Go of Nothing. Relax your mind and discover the wonder of your true nature. You can find that at your local bookstop around the corner or online, any bookstores online as well. And I read the Eckhart Tolle edition. You've worked with him in the past, and what was that
Yes.
like?
Um, Worked with him a bit. We've been good friends for many
Yeah.
years. It's an interesting little story. When his book, The Power of Now, first came out, he self-published it in
Yes.
Canada, and somebody gave me a copy. He was not known at all. Nobody
Mm.
knew him. And I read the book and I just thought, right on. And completely unsolicited, I wrote him a couple of paragraphs of praise, endorsement, saying what a wonderful book this was.
Yes.
Then a couple of years later, I wanted to meet him, got to meet him, and he said two things. One, he said, I was the first person to endorse his book. I was the first person to praise his book, which he said really stood out. But not only that, it was me, Peter Russell, who did it. And then he pointed me to his little bookcase above his mantelpiece. And he had about that, 2 foot of books or something on his mantelpiece. And he said, look there. He said, Timothy Eckhart said, you see those 2 books? These are the books I bought from England, he said, and 2 of those are your books. I bought 2 of your books from England. So he already knew of me and my writing, and
Oh.
then, I endorsed his. And we just became friends. We used to meet, hang up. Since he's become really well known, I haven't seen him so much recently,
Sure.
but we just became like good friends and discuss ideas and what we were doing and take walks and things. Yeah,
And it's
lovely guy.
brilliant because the work that you have in this book and also your previous collection of books are so in line with The Power of Now and A New World that Eckhart has put out. And so, again, if you are on that path of discovery and just understanding on a deeper level how your consciousness works, I highly recommend adding this to your library to chew on and sleep on and then thinking again throughout the day.
Great.
So, Peter, I have a few questions as we wrap up. And again, thank you so much for your time today and your sharing your wisdom. So, my first question is this. What's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
I regularly, every day, check into Catherine Cox Richardson, who's a political scientist who has this in-depth picture of American history from slavery through Civil War to the present day, and sees the patterns and sees what's going on. And so she always takes some contemporary issue, the news of the day, or rather the news of the day before, and she writes this letter online, and she produces it as a blog and a website, and she does videos. But I find it really interesting to put that news in a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
So I really recommend her. She's a voice of our times, but contextualizing in the much bigger picture of American history.
Brilliant. Well, we will link her up in the show notes, so if people want to check that blog out, they can take a look there. Again, all resources we talked about today are found at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So tell us, who's one person, somebody that you know personally, that you just feel is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
Right. Someone called Karen Buckley, actually Karen Wilhelm Buckley. She's been working in organizations for 30 years, working as a coach with senior management, really often on an individual basis, long-term basis, really helping them in their organizations and with often quite small organizations. But what I like about her is she has a very strong emphasis on women and women issues and women's role in the workplace, and a lot of what goes with that. So she's very strong on that aspect. She really is a champion for women in the workplace.
Brilliant.
So I really like. And she puts out a blog about once every couple of weeks or so. But Karen Wilhelm Buckley is the person to look up.
Beautiful. We will link her up in the show notes for people if you guys want to check her work out as well. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Being with you. Being I'm grateful for so much. I mean, just being here in a lovely rural environment. The sun is shining.
Yeah.
I am healthy. Life is good. I mean, I find it difficult to think of anything I'm not grateful for.
Yeah.
I can just go on and on and on. So much stuff I'm grateful for. Everything that's happened in my life has led me to here, and I got nothing to complain about. So, And gratitude is so important. One of my practices each day when I start the day is to feel gratitude. And I usually start by feeling something I'm grateful for in that moment, whatever it is. But then to go deeper and just not to feel gratitude for like being with you, but then noticing how gratitude feels and just opening the heart and feeling gratitude in the most general way, not gratitude for something, but just feeling gratitude in a general way. And that takes us out of our ego mind, our thinking mind.
Yes.
And, just about every tradition, many philosophers, teachers have emphasized the value of gratitude. So whatever prompts us to feel gratitude, to actually take a moment and feel gratitude.
Yeah, gosh, it's such a beautiful reminder. And the visual I got as you were speaking there is thinking about if you're wearing these big, heavy coats, layered upon layered upon layer, and they're so heavy on your shoulders. And those coats might be identities or filters for your life or your professionally or personally. When you release and you let go of those coats and you really get down to your core and you feel gratitude and its core essence. I mean, I think that there's something quite beautiful and pure about that, that helps remind us that we are all really interconnected. We are all one on a deeper level.
Yes.
So again, if you are curious about Peter's work, you can find his details and social media handles and his website, peterrussell.com, over at our show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So, Peter, my final question for you is this. Thank you.
Okay. Here we go. What is it?
Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, and she is so desperate to relax her mind. She has been very burnt out, very stressed, and under the gun with many, many deadlines. What's one thing you could just whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
I think where we started, just take a few deeper breaths.
Yes.
Because that's starting the letting go, just taking a few deeper breaths, just pausing, just 10 seconds, just doing that for 10 seconds. And again, but just doing that's the doorway for me.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
Pleasure. Enjoyed being with you.